Local debt nears 100 trillion yuan. Expert, the CCP can't afford to pay interest. CCP research body publishes article on unified currency for Greater Bay Area, quickly removed. China witnesses 3 unusual phenomena: manufacturing shrinks and worker rights cases surge. Anti-addiction policies fail as nearly 80% of Chinese youth become internet addicts. Shandong transplant doctor implicated in body trafficking scandal, unveiling a dark network of corruption. Australia conducts first test of SM-6 advanced shipborne air defense missile, targeting CCP. It's all covered in today's China Truths. Local debt nears 100 trillion yuan. Expert, the CCP can't afford to pay interest. As the financial situation of local governments continues to deteriorate, they are increasingly relying on debt issuance to finance and alleviate the debt crisis. CCP official data shows that in the first 7 months of this year, local governments issued approximately 4.2 trillion yuan, about $590 billion, in bonds, of which about 2 trillion yuan, approximately $280 billion, was for refinancing bonds. Local government bonds are divided into refinancing bonds and new bonds based on their use. The former is used to repay the principal of maturing local government bonds or existing debt, which is essentially borrowing new to repay old. The latter is primarily used for major infrastructure projects. Regarding local government debt issuance, Li Hengqing, a Chinese economist at the U.S. Institute for Information and Strategic Studies, told the Epoch Times, "The key issue we're discussing now is whether these debts are enough, and it's clear they're not." Why? Because the government has too much debt. He mentioned that information from various sources indicates that local government debt is already at 94 trillion yuan, about $13.12 trillion. If the interest rate is between 3% to 4%, then it would take 3 trillion yuan annually just to pay the interest. So the money used by local governments to repay the debt is just a drop in the bucket, not enough. CCP official data shows that as of the end of June 2024, the total local government debt nationwide was 42.6 trillion yuan, about $5.94 trillion. However, Goldman Sachs estimated in August 2023 that local government debt had reached 94 trillion yuan, about $13.12 trillion, including the debt of local government financing platforms, hidden local debt. The debt of local government financing platforms is off-balance sheet liability, which belongs to hidden local debt. This part of the data is shown in the CCP's official fiscal data. Mr. Li Hengqing said, even Xi Jinping himself doesn't know the exact figure now. Mr. Li has revealed that China's local government debt is rapidly approaching 100 trillion yuan, about $13.95 trillion, with the total debt now at 99.2 trillion yuan, about $13.84 trillion, including 95 trillion yuan, approximately $13.25 trillion, in principal and an additional 4.2 trillion yuan, approximately $590 billion, in newly issued bonds. The situation has become so severe that local governments are struggling to pay even the interest on their debts, let alone the principal. The lack of funds has left local governments unable to support essential public services or stimulate economic development. With fiscal revenues at critically low levels, these governments have no choice but to issue more bonds to keep afloat. In a late July meeting, the CCP's Politburo urged the acceleration of special bond issuance for the second half of the year. Experts predict a significant increase in bond issuance during August and September, potentially marking the peak for this year. Mr. Li Hengqing also highlighted that the burden of this nearly 100 trillion yuan in debt falls primarily on large state-owned enterprises and the 6 major state-owned banks in China. These institutions are compelled by the government to purchase patriotic bonds, even though repayment seems unlikely. As these bonds turn into bad debts, the banks face a looming liquidity crisis, fueling a vicious debt cycle. Goldman Sachs has already downgraded the stock ratings of these banks, citing their high exposure to local debt. Mr. Li warns that the crisis is nearing a critical breaking point. CCP research body publishes article on unified currency for Greater Bay Area, quickly removed. Recently, the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, CAS, website published an article about creating a Greater Bay Area 2.0, suggesting the establishment of a Central Bay Area Committee to provide centralized leadership, and calling for the unification of currency and documents across Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau. However, the article was removed just a few days after it was posted. The article, titled Strengthening Institutional Openness and Innovation to Build a Greater Bay Area 2.0, was authored by Mr. Fang Hanting, a researcher at Zhejiang University's Center for Regional Coordinated Development, which is recognized as a national high-end think tank by the CCP. The article argued that conditions were ripe to elevate the Greater Bay Area into a national offshore economic center, proposing the closure of the area's 11 cities and the formation of an international economic entity. However, it was quickly taken down for reasons that remain unclear. The suggestions outlined in the article sparked significant discussion on social media, particularly among Hong Kong residents. Many expressed skepticism, with some viewing the proposals as an attempt to further integrate Hong Kong into the mainland. Veteran commentator Yan Chuango, in a Facebook post on August 9, criticized the article, describing it as full of nonsense. Yan suggested that the article's proposals were an attempt to revive the largely stagnant Greater Bay Area project, which has struggled to gain traction since its inception. Mr. Yan pointed out that the creation of any economic zone should be driven by market demand rather than government directives. He argued that the Greater Bay Area was a product of the CCP's top-down planning, likely conceived as part of Xi Jinping's efforts to assert his leadership. Despite the initial fanfare surrounding the Greater Bay Area, Mr. Yan noted that the project has seen little success, particularly in Hong Kong, where the implementation of the national security law and the passage of Article 23 have led to a decline in the city's international stature. He criticized the CAS article's proposals for one government for the Bay, one customs for the Bay, one currency for the Bay, and one document for the Bay, calling them excessively arrogant. Mr. Yan also remarked that, following the third plenary session, the CCP has faced criticism for its lack of crisis management strategies. He suggested that the article was intended to flatter Xi Jinping but went too far, exceeding his expectations, which likely led to its swift removal. In a comment on Mr. Yan's post, a netizen observed that the rapid changes in Hong Kong have had a significant impact on China's international image, noting that the once promised 50 years unchanged policy for Hong Kong has been easily overturned, further highlighting the inconsistency and unreliability of the mainland's policy announcements. China witnesses three unusual phenomena: manufacturing shrinks and worker rights cases surge. In recent discussions on social media, netizens have identified three alarming trends. First, many job seekers in Guangzhou and Shenzhen have shifted to driving for Didi or delivering parcels, leading to fierce competition in these sectors. Second, some businesses in Beijing are waiving rent, only requiring tenants to cover utility bills on time. Third, an increasing number of white-collar workers in Shanghai are now bringing their own lunches to work. These phenomena, previously unheard of, reflect the serious economic challenges facing the country. One Hunan-based blogger noted that the exploitation of ordinary people has reached unprecedented levels, with nearly 100 million taxi drivers and delivery workers now struggling to make a living. On August 7, China's General Administration of Customs reported that export growth in July was the slowest in 3 months, raising concerns about the future of the country's vast manufacturing sector. Earlier, on July 31, the National Bureau of Statistics reported that the Purchasing Managers' Index, PMI, dropped to 49.4 in July, marking the third consecutive month of contraction, signaling a continued decline in manufacturing activity. In Guangdong and Shenzhen, long-established electronics companies are declaring bankruptcy, with scenes of workers lining up for compensation becoming all too common. A local commentator noted that the once bustling Shenzhen, known as the world's factory, is quietly transforming. Conversations on the streets now revolve around factory closures rather than job opportunities. In Dongguan, a city known for its manufacturing prowess, the lifting of pandemic restrictions has led to a dramatic drop in orders. Reports on social media indicate that over 3,500 companies in Yuan have shut down in 2023, including 2,050 manufacturing firms and 1,000 OEMs. The shrinking manufacturing sector is not only damaging China's economy but also posing a serious threat to social stability. A recent report from China Labor Bulletin, a Hong Kong-based NGO, revealed a significant increase in worker rights and strike protests, with 757 incidents recorded in the first half of the year, up from 696 in the same period last year. A large portion of these protests emerged from the manufacturing sector, where workers are finding it increasingly difficult to survive on their current wages. One notable example is Nord Leather, a company with over 20 years of history, which shut down in May, leaving its workers unpaid. This closure prompted hundreds of workers to gather outside the factory, demanding the wages they were owed. With the company's owner nowhere to be found, these workers were left in a desperate situation. Some reported that they had not been paid for months before the shutdown, with videos on Douyin showing the factory closed and wages unpaid for up to 6 months. In a related development, Zhujiang Icon New Energy Group, a Zhujiang-based company partnering with international giants like Panasonic and Toyota, abruptly halted production at several of its branches on June 7, instructing employees to take a 2 to 3 month leave. During the first month of the shutdown, workers received basic wages and allowances, but from the second month onward, they were paid only 70% of the local minimum wage, roughly 600 yuan, about $84, per month. Additionally, workers had to cover their own social security, housing fund, and other expenses, making it nearly impossible to meet basic living costs. Furthermore, they were ineligible for unemployment benefits during this leave period, compounding their financial difficulties. These developments highlight a growing crisis within China's manufacturing sector, one that could have far-reaching consequences for both the economy and social stability if not addressed promptly. Anti-addiction policies fail as nearly 80% of Chinese youth become internet addicts. Despite the Chinese government's implementation of real-name authentication for minors in online gaming, a policy in place for over 3 years, a recent survey has revealed that nearly 80% of minors are bypassing this system by using others' information to log into games. This alarming trend indicates that the official anti-addiction real-name authentication system is failing in many regions. On August 1, the Beijing Youth Legal Aid and Research Center released a report titled Survey on Internet Consumption Among Minors in County Areas, which sheds light on the current state of internet use among Chinese youth. The report surveyed students around the age of 12 from 6 provinces and 8 counties. To ensure the accuracy of the data, investigators conducted face-to-face interviews with the minors, without allowing teachers or parents to be present. Key findings from the report show that among 1,108 minors surveyed in Hebei, Guizhou, Jiangxi, Anhui, Shaanxi, and Shandong provinces, 49.1% spend more than 3 hours online each day, while 32.04% spend more than 5 hours online daily. On weekends and holidays, a staggering 79.9% of minors reported spending more than 3 hours online each day. Despite the requirement for real-name authentication, the report reveals that this regulation is largely ineffective. An overwhelming 77% of minors are not using their own information to log in. Of those surveyed, 41.52% have tried using the youth mode, designed to limit online activity, while 58.48% have never used it. The youth mode, or Youth Anti-Addiction System, is a government initiative to curb minors' addiction to short videos, social media, and other online platforms. This system restricts access outside of designated hours, yet many minors have found ways to circumvent these controls. The report highlights that 56.6% of minors in county areas use their parents' information to authenticate their gaming accounts, 12.8% use their grandparents' details, 5.7% rely on other relatives and friends, and 1.4% even turn to Taobao for proxy authentication services. One student, who spends over 12 hours online daily during weekends and holidays, shared that most of his classmates use deceptive tactics to get their parents to help with real-name authentication. Chinese Education Daily quoted Professor Yuan Ningning from the School of Law at the University of Political Science and Law, who stressed that real name authentication is the first line of defense in preventing minors from becoming addicted to games. If this system fails, subsequent protective measures lose their effectiveness. One interviewed minor expressed that the desire to play games is not due to an obsession, but rather a lack of other entertainment options. Investigators who visited 13 schools in 8 counties confirmed this reality. They found that nearly every school's playground and gymnasium were locked after school hours and on weekends, preventing students from accessing these spaces. Additionally, there were no available facilities in the counties for minors to exercise or engage in outdoor activities, leaving them with limited alternatives to online gaming. Shandong transplant doctor implicated in body trafficking scandal, unveiling a dark network of corruption. On August 8, the organ transplant center at Qingdao University-affiliated hospital urgently removed the profile of Dr. Li Jiqiang from its website. Dr. Li is implicated in a scandal involving the illegal harvesting and selling of human bodies by Shaanxi Orui Company. Analysts suggest that this case may be part of a much larger and more complex network of corruption. The scandal centers around Shaanxi Orui Company, which has been accused of illegally harvesting and selling human bodies to produce medical materials for profit. According to a prosecution opinion issued by the Taiyuan City Public Security Bureau in May, Dr. Li, deputy director of the Liver Disease Center at Qingdao University-affiliated hospital, preserved bodies in cold storage and sold them to Shaanxi Orui on 5 separate occasions between 2015 and 2021. These transactions reportedly involved the sale of dozens of human skeletons, with prices ranging from 10,000 to 22,000 yuan each, about 1,400 to 2,800 US dollars. The prosecution opinion further reveals that the bodies purchased by Shaanxi Orui were of individuals aged 20 to 60 who had no known diseases. Commentators are raising serious questions about the legitimacy of Dr. Li's actions. US-based analyst Tang Jingyuan pointed out that if these individuals had died in a hospital, a death certificate would have been required for the family to claim the body. Tang questioned why these bodies were never claimed by their families and how Dr. Li, without proper authority, was able to handle and sell them. Adding to the controversy, Chinese affairs expert Heng Yi suggested that the sale of skeletons by the transplant center raises concerns about the legality of the organ sources. He noted that illegal organ harvesting in China is a massive industry, and this case appears to be connected to that industry, with the remains of those whose organs are harvested being sold as skeletons. The scandal also touches on the broader issue of organ harvesting in China. Dr. Li's hospital, Qingdao University-affiliated hospital, is home to a transplant center co-founded by liver transplant expert Zhang Yunjin in 2014. Zhang has been investigated by the World Organization to investigate the persecution of Falun Gong for his alleged involvement in the forced harvesting of organs from Falun Gong practitioners. Zhang's career includes his role as deputy director of the Liver Transplant Institute at Beijing Armed Police General Hospital, where he reportedly completed over 1,570 liver transplants. The sources of the organs used in these transplants have been shrouded in secrecy, with military hospitals and the armed police playing a central role in the organ harvesting industry. In 2014, the CCP announced it would stop using organs from executed prisoners, with an official cessation in 2015. However, concerns remain about the true source of organs in China. Despite this, Qingdao University-affiliated hospital invested heavily in expanding its transplant operations, leading to a significant increase in organ availability in transplant surgeries, placing it at the forefront in Shandong province. The so-called Qingdao model for organ donation, implemented by Zhang Yunjin, involves transferring potential donors to the hospital's transplant center, declaring them brain dead, and preparing for transplant surgery. Investigations have revealed that in some cases, brain death is artificially induced to facilitate organ harvesting. Further complicating the case, Shaanxi Orui, the company involved in the body trafficking scandal, is controlled by the China Institute for Radiation Protection. The company's head, Li Baoxing, developed allogeneic bone graft materials, earning national recognition and patents. Despite being under strict regulation, Shaanxi Orui managed to profit from forging body donation documents and inspection reports, creating a black market industry chain that operated undetected for years. This scandal not only exposes illegal body trafficking but also suggests a disturbing connection to China's broader and highly secretive organ harvesting industry, raising serious ethical and legal questions. Australia conducts first test of SM-6 Advanced Shipborne Air Defence Missile, targeting CCP. On August 10, the Australian government announced that it had conducted its first test of the Raytheon SM-6 missile from a naval vessel. This marks a significant step for Australia in acquiring and integrating the most advanced U.S. shipborne air defense missiles into its arsenal amid increasingly strained relations with the CCP. The Australian Department of Defence confirmed that the HMAS Sydney, a cruiser, carried out the test near Hawaii during the Pacific Dragon 2024 exercise. This successful test is considered a major milestone under the SM-6 missile agreement with the United States, a deal initially approved in 2021. The SM-6 is among the most advanced air defense missiles in the U.S. arsenal, capable of intercepting ballistic missiles and engaging a range of targets, including ships, ground threats, and aerial targets. Mr. Pat Conroy, Australia's Minister for Defence Industry and Capability Delivery, emphasised the importance of this development, stating, "This test demonstrates the Navy's commitment to rapidly acquiring critical defence capabilities." As tensions with the CCP continue to rise, Australia is actively enhancing its military strength, including through US-funded projects to upgrade its defense infrastructure. The SM-6 missile significantly expands the defensive range of Australian naval ships, enabling the Royal Australian Navy (RAN) to keep potential threats at a distance and allowing deeper operations in contested waters should a conflict arise. While the Australian government has not disclosed the exact number of SM-6 missiles it plans to acquire, U.S. government documents from 2021 estimated the cost of the deal, including both SM-6 and older SM-2 missiles, at $350 million. The announcement did not specify when the SM-6 missiles would become fully operational but confirmed that they would be deployed on Australia's Hobart-class destroyers. Australia currently operates 3 Hobart-class destroyers, each capable of carrying 48 air defense missiles. Don't forget to leave a comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us. Make sure to like and subscribe to see more interesting topics from China Truths.